day 9 of phase 2. So I just checked the weight and I'm heavier than when I started. All right, well, let's try not to spin out over that. I could say yes, and it's not like I started lifting some weights, which I haven't done in a long time, which that would actually change the body. So this kind of, even though I did the scale, the fat percentage went up. I would think I'm massively PMSing. So whether I get my period or not, I'm recognized. So this is like this learning to be in tune with what the fuck is going on with my body. And that's what it goes like. So I had done a diary about really like in the not having, relations with a person and getting like being on my own and kind of like for a number of years, like what, like in that sense, like what am I restoring back to my body? What am I doing? It brings up so many different things. Okay, now you're changing the food. Okay, that's changing the chemistry of things. Now you're changing blah, 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 blah. So for myself, that's a longer process. So it depends where you're at. Some people, it's like, oh, I just want to focus on changing my food and that's it. But it's like, if you really want to really understand yourself and then get to like that's I'm fascinated by this, like myself and this deep rooted kind of where does my thinking come from, it is a lot, because there's food then is chemicals and different things. But if you start something new and you make changes to the body, and even new being, so this is phase 2 to 8, I'm still sticking to this window basically of eating, that I could say I feel tighter, like my body feels tighter and different. I've changed a couple different things. My emotions, my energy, everything's been all out of whack. I have to recognize those because I'm also going through so many other things. So this is where, and I say this because yesterday I was just randomly just angry and tired, and I've been like, it's been such a struggle for me. And then when you want to do something, so as a person before my depression, so I've been in this depression for 2.5 years. Well, 2 years for sure. I think I started, like, you could argue more manic in the beginning if I really was honest with myself, because I was still high performing, but that's actually so high that's almost like made me snap because of the things around. And that's actually what I recognize. It's the brain speeding up and then crashing. So how long can you go? So a person with trauma, how long can you go almost like playing, actually Jim Carrey makes a great reference about depression or whatever. It's like your body's, it's like you're playing a character. Okay, how long can you get out of that character? And that switches. So yesterday, this healing process, so a lot of people, if you don't have the coping mechanisms or tools to deal with that, you're going to struggle, and that's what actually leads to depression. They say, oh, we can't figure out where depression comes from. Well, as a person who's done all of this, I could clearly have a conversation, so maybe the doctor, and I fully know and I have enough evidence now to prove it. I actually have enough evidence. That's a side note. So if a doctor wants to have a conversation at some point, right, like it's like, and I can say that because in this process, really like analyzing other people, where it comes from, how you feel, and that's the brain, because our brains are millions of years old, what it would trigger, why, how, where that comes from, the body, the anger turned inward, there's so much to it. I fucking fully understand it. So if there's like I said, one day, so these videos right now are not quote unquote public per se, but you could be watching it at the time then it is, so it's hard to say, but at this present time, and I will prove with what I've been doing, what it actually is, how it's linked to depression, and how our thoughts and our need to please and self-punish at the same time, and the shame and thoughts actually can lead to the depression. That goes back to what's in your toolkit. What type of love have you been given? And then on the flip side, do you feel obligated to? And a lot of times when people can't figure out in depression, and things, I'm saying this on the brain because I noticed this with myself too. I've noticed patterns that people, right, like I have an opposite life of a person who's depressed to somebody else who, or whatever, I'm not going to get into, but I know, but they have a completely different upbringing, family environment, the quote unquote good family, and I can see, like, it's clear your mental health issues come from the fact that you can't break away from control from your family, which actually comes to, without realizing it, because you're so babied. And that actually leads to identity issues, which is actually ironically why we struggle so much with ourselves. So people could have good intentions for us, right? Or they think like, oh, I love you, so I'm doing this. And we do this to ourselves, can do this to other people too, so be aware of it. I'm always been aware of it with my daughter, and that's actually why it had to get harder, right? And that's a side note of not controlling, but at the same time, I'm recognizing the patterns of the things I did with enabling, because we when you don't know, you want to take care of something versus mentoring it and helping it grow, and that means backing off. Well, you have to take the same approach with yourself and being kinder to yourself. And that's the different roles of like, okay, this is, I know what's best for you, this is what you have to do, versus like, okay, like helping somebody grow. Well, you have to actually take that same approach with yourself. And so when I was spinning out yesterday, it's like the character, you've got to get out of your character. And that's like this, people that have had, emotions that are like this, or they're multiple personalities, or they're whatever, it's or you're so high, ADD and whatever. Those are distractions from the thoughts that take our brain back to some place that's uncomfortable every time, and food's a trigger for that. It takes us back somewhere else, whether we recognize it or not. And our brains are millions of years old, and working that out is a thing, because that has a chemical effect on the body. Because we have to think, that's just law. You come from your parents who come from something else, Well, that goes into the brain. And then what did doctors ask you? What's your family history? What's your stuff? Those are those core things. Well, then you have the environment that's shaped around you. Well, okay, now do you know why you do what you do? Do you really know? Or are you just so robotic that you do what you do and you don't recognize why? Most people are. Most people live like, right, you have to think the earth, how big the earth is, and how many people stay like just in their neighborhood, they stay in the same house in the country. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's you, right? But understand that that's a programming. That's a programming. So you have to, and that's why so many people are so afraid to go after their dream, or go after their dreams, or dream big. And that's actually the process of it, because it's uncomfortable. Like when I actually stopped in this process and sat and gone, what do I want for my life? When, why? That's the truth of why I'm uncomfortable, because it's the disconnect from my future to my present to my past. And that's the issue. That's why so many people, it goes with ADD, blah, 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 can be so uncomfortable with sitting with their thoughts for a couple minutes, so uncomfortable with meditation, so uncomfortable with all of those things. But it's to be understanding the presence and our brain, and then the mentally ill, right? And I say this is like I said, one day, right, I'm documenting this because doctors don't have enough information. They don't understand the uncomfortableness of being in present. That's why, so as a person, I was first section, now that I have my memories and my different things, I believe it was around 6 now, when I was first raped and molested, whatever. And I say that raped because so much as a person who was molested and groomed, don't recognize that it is, because it wasn't violent. That psychology of that is such a mind fuck, especially when you're a child to an adult. These things weren't discussed. So I'm like, fuck it. I'm discussing everything with myself so that I understand myself. Why? Because if I would have gone to group therapy, am I being honest? No, I'm judging the group. Because I'm so worried about the opinions of the people, even though at my core I had the attitude, but then I'm nice. So am I being fully honest? No, because when we're in this environment with other people, we're triggered by the environment and the response, which goes back to the root of our ego. Ego is the other side of ourselves, right? Like, what does that, so the whole world, that's what I said, is a mirror reflection of you, what's triggering you. Okay, triggering yourself. Talk to yourself, rewatch your videos. You'll go through a pattern of this if you're honest with yourself. And then the goal, right, so that you can be more like this to handle things, but still live life, right, where it's, because life then is going to happen like this, but you're like this. And as a person who was, and that's going back to even like things like schizophrenic tendencies and different things, it's like that's in the brain from other places, and that does link to control, though. So, okay, do you trust yourself to control yourself? And then are you allowed to control yourself? And I say that, are you allowed? And really, because we all are in our rights. What so many people don't understand that didn't come from abuse, why it's so hard to break out of a mental prison, when you weren't allowed. But you don't realize that. Why? Because that's psychological abuse and you weren't aware of it. That's what I had to realize. So continuation phase 2, day 9. It is right now early afternoon, almost 2. I did a video this morning of talking about how I'm feeling. Okay, I think I'm out of sorts. I must be PMSing. I'm spinning out. So I work from home right now, which is an added, and I'm alone, so it adds an element of extra stuff because it's like you have to get your stuff out. And I've been dealing with like mental health and then trying to solve something where I'm obsessed. Not that I don't have an opportunity to go out and do 50 million things. I absolutely do. I'm choosing to go through this fucked up process in a sense to really push through, to heal, to prove to different things. I talked to my mom, right? She was saying, and why I'm going this unconventional path and whatever too, it's like saving my life because I was so failed by the system, by doctors, by help, by support. So my mom's saying, right, and she's been completely failed by doctors. And she's saying, like, she was saying something about, well, not all doctors are bad. And I'm like, I never thought all doctors are bad. I've just lost my trust in the doctors and the help. So even in Canada here, like, filled out a form. Took me like 2 hours almost to fill out this form. Nobody got back to me, right? Like I'm saying this spinning out because I'm past constantly thinking of suicidal thoughts, but I have these wish for death all the time thoughts now. And that's the sin, being brutally honest with her, because this mental health issue, going through the depression, I was going through the different things and understanding myself, the physical tiredness, being in front of a computer because there's actually things that come at you, to being able to like separate and go for a walk, recognizing things. And then recognizing where your body's at. So my body, and then also how that ties to work. So I have things that I'm supposed to be doing that I don't, and I'm like, oh, right? Like that's what's pulling me, the shoulds, the things, versus the being able to freely go where I need to go, right? So it's like I need to get to a schedule because then I'll get things done. But that's the irony. And I kind of had a realization this morning as I was going through that, because I started this eating cycle of feeling like, oh my God, I'm starving at, eating, I basically ate all my calories almost in the morning. But I said like, and going, I'm so, right, because that binge eat, but I try to keep not much in the house because of that right now, like because I'm aware of that, but also letting myself, because I would have easily just gone fuck it and had whatever. So this is this balance as I'm trying to work this through myself as my own patient. Why? Because there's no help. There's absolutely no help. So is that saying, do I believe all doctors are bad? Do I believe there's good? No, like I don't trust them anymore to go get that help. I've even paid, therapists that were supposed to be in these positions and whatever else that were kind of out, and they completely failed me when I needed different types, and I'm not going to get into the details of that, but that's why I had to do these things this way and dig down to fight, like how am I going to get through this? And again, though, that doesn't mean, right, because how I get this information into my head as well is I'm cautious of what goes into my head. So I watch doctors on like YouTube and clips and things of people I know, okay, they would probably get it. So that advice makes sense. And that's how I piece it together. So that goes back to what's going in your head. And that's actually how that's healing me. So the importance of, so if I was doing nothing, right, and trying to get through this and based on my own information, that wouldn't work. No, I read a lot. I watch, choosing the information that's going into my head by who I'm choosing to watch, what I choose, right? The algorithms of what you do, like on your Instagram or on your Facebook or whatever else, like what's choosing your head. So I'm aware of that. But it's stopping this part of my brain going, holy shit, like I'm spinning out. I'm not doing well. I'm not feeling good. But I want to stop myself so it doesn't become catastrophic. I have to acknowledge how I'm feeling. I'm feeling tired. I'm not feeling good. So why am I pushing myself with the shoulds? And that goes back, I had to realize with my father having a very, like in my households and my things, I had my upbringings, one household was a one way, one household was a different way, that's just the way my life was. That created so many like different characters at different times. And I'm realizing now that I'm by myself, in this one character as I'm going through this in this journey, that so many different characters come through. And so many people would have to recognize that. If you're in yourself and you're spinning out in a depression, or you're emotional eating or whatever, it comes from all these other things. And that's the internal dialogue to recognize, okay, well, where did that come from? How did it get there? So that you can actually get to the core of changing that thinking. Otherwise, you're never going to be, right? So and that's what I'm really working on with this reprogramming, and recognizing, identifying those automatic thoughts to reprogram. And that's what cognitive therapy is. But when there's so many layers at the core of the difficulty, it's not that, like, so many people even like that have gone through, and I've seen people teaching cognitive therapy, they didn't get to the core issues. And as coaches and as doctors, I've seen the ones teaching it, they haven't either. And if that was true, then I would have had help by now. But I still haven't had help. So that's where I come back around to saying, when am I going to get the help or see? Because I've done, as a patient, everything I possibly could have to find help my whole life. I've done everything I possibly could have. They failed me. Okay. I've also interviewed in my lifetime and spoke to people in the same situations, different things, and witnessed as they lied to doctors or patients or different. Okay, so the traditional help, the way they're helping is not right, and it's not working. So I know that. Okay, so that's where, so going back to having this conversation with my mom, right? And she's, even she was explaining something, her partner's schizophrenic, and, whatever, said, I guess he was in the hospital last couple months. Oh, but found a better doctor. Great. But what's the issue? And right now he might be doing better. He might have found the meds, whatever else. He goes back to this government type of housing that's abusive, which I know because that's the problem. And I've seen it, witnessed it firsthand, that so many people running these programs are abusive. Okay, you go back to the environment of abuse. That's why the cycle continues. So arguably, it doesn't have to be that extreme. If you're in an environment where you're triggered by other people around you or other things, you might be in an abusive environment without or like, what's the definition of abuse? The psychology, right? So it's like you could be triggered. So people think of abuse and they think of it like physical abuse or sexual abuse. Psychological abuse is the hardest to identify and recognize, and it can be you have the majors where it's like, oh yeah, that would be off. The minors, like, have you been around passive aggressive people and you're like, I don't know how to deal with this? That's where a lot of so much come from, and that, funny enough, comes from so much of what's embedded in our families around people and around. And that's like, can you be still with your thoughts? Then you have the people that go off, right? And arguably, right now, I'm one of those people, right? I've become such a loner to do this because I've been so unwell, but it's the only way I can do it to get through this because I've been so unwell. And again, it goes back to because I gave too much. I had to see I broke. And as I'm trying to get back into the world of society and different things, it's the issue with an online presence or coaching or any of those things, it's not that I don't like, because I'm helping people as much as I can from a distance, and that's something else that I'm not going to get into the details on this, and that was something else. But the actual conversations are the things I'm like, right now, to message people or to talk to people, that's what I'm having a difficulty with, that I have to get over fast for the next stage, who I want to deal with. And that goes back to like your whole life. So I've eliminated that to go, okay, well, I don't have because I need to see, I don't have the excuses of it's somebody else, right? I didn't have safe home environment. So, but I didn't realize that. Then you go, okay, now that I'm safe, where's the danger? Here. Well, that means it's myself. Okay, well, now I have to reprogram that. And we have to get to that core and realize that. And that's what technically doctors should be helping their patients with mental health issues do, that they're not, though. And that's why I say with, the earlier part, I'm going to clip this video together, because where does depression come from? I fully understand where it comes from because of all the work that I've done. This phase 1, phase 2 having to do with the body, that's just one thing. Like, I've done this now for years to see that okay, well, it's working. Because I was so failed, I did something different. So that goes back to the gratitude of the blessings of understanding my pain and from pain and pleasure, anger, going into like all of those, but also being kinder to myself. So today I'm struggling. My mental health is struggling. I'm struggling with everything. I'm not where I was like in that stage of suicidal thoughts on a regular basis. Even though, and I say I came to suicidal thoughts though, again in 2020 because of the system. I wasn't there until I went to go get help, and then I was failed by the doctor. So the direct suicidal thoughts linked to my past of abuse, but it came from the system. They are responsible for that. That's why I say until I get help, or these doctors recognize that, they are responsible for the suicides, because they're not recognizing how they're triggering their patients by not helping them. And again, that's a blanket statement right now, but that doesn't mean I think all doctors are bad, but I have seen no evidence yet. So today's date is July 6th, 2022, and there's no evidence that any doctors in the mental health field know what the fuck they're doing yet.